Indonesia. Astronomers inform us that the best view will be available in eastern Timor, beginning in the early afternoon. Here's Ray Robinson now with today's story.
Thanks, Jeff. The island called Timor lies at the southern end of maritime Southeast Asia in the north of the Timor Sea. These days, the island is divided between two sovereign states, East Timor on the eastern side of the island and Indonesia on the western side. The Indonesian part, known as West Timor, constitutes part of the Indonesian province of East Nusa Tenggara. The whole island covers an area of 11,883 square miles. The name Timor is a variant of Timur in the Malay language and east. The island is called East because it lies at the eastern end of the Indonesian Lesser Sunda Islands. Mainland Australia, which is separated from Timor by the Timor Sea, is just 300 miles distant. The earliest known prehistory of the island called Timor dates back to the Asian colonial days under early merchants from both China and India. The first European explorers and merchants were from both Portugal and Holland, and the island is still divided to this day. West Timor was known as Dutch Timor until 1949, when it became Indonesian Timor, and East Timor was known as Portuguese Timor, a Portuguese colony until independence in 1975. As the nearest island with a European settlement at the time, Timor was the destination of William Bligh and the seamen who were loyal to him following the infamous mutiny on the Bounty near Pitcairn Island in 1789. It was also the location where survivors of the wrecked HMS Pandora, sent to arrest the Bounty mutineers, landed in 1791 after their ship sank on the Great Barrier Reef off the eastern coast of Australia. Through the years, the island of Timor has undergone more than its share of turmoil and international trouble. Although Portugal was neutral during World War II, Portuguese Timor was occupied by Australian and Dutch forces in December 1941. Then later, the Japanese occupied Timor beginning in February 1942. A contingent from the Japanese Army on Timor Island scouted and filmed the Northwest Islands of Australia with Air Force coverage in 1944. Soon after the end of World War I, both the Dutch and Portuguese established communication wireless stations on the island of Timor in 1921. The Dutch at Kopang under the international call sign PKD, and the Portuguese at Dili under the international call sign CRE. At the time, the Dutch operated a whole network of 20 or more low-powered wireless communication stations throughout the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia, though the Portuguese station, CRE, was a complete loner. However, nearly 10 years later, in November 1940, the Portuguese established an additional communication station at Vila Tavairo, a low-powered 10-watt unit operating on shortwave 4,000 kHz. Just before the arrival of the Japanese Army in February 1942, the Australian consul in Dili communicated with the Australian government by sending messages via the Dutch station PKD at Kopang. The Australian Armed Forces soon afterwards, in 1943, constructed a small radio transmitter for communication with Northern Army headquarters in Darwin, Northern Territory. Now, the coming solar eclipse will be visible on the island of Timor during the early afternoon of Thursday, April the 20th. The American Space Agency, NASA, has asked Wavescan and other radio organizations throughout the world for assistance during this eclipse event, as well as during other coming eclipse events also. NASA is requesting monitoring information at the time of the eclipse from international radio listeners and amateur radio operators throughout the world, and particularly within the United States itself. We here at Wavescan would also be pleased to receive radio monitoring information during this coming eclipse, and in particular from the areas of darkness and semi-darkness in the South Pacific and the islands of Southeastern Asia. You can email Adrian Peterson, our Editor-in-Chief, direct with any observations at adrian.m.peterson@gmail.com. That's Peterson spelt Peterson, and again it's adrian.m.peterson@gmail.com.
Thank you, Ray Robinson at KVOH in Los Angeles. Next on Wavescan today, Wandering the World with the Radio, Chapter 2, Early Experimental Wireless. First known public demonstration.